Je me terre. De position.
Hello, lovelies. Housekeeping. So, not a lot's happened on the writing front for Run-In, but I have the new artist working away on stuff. I will try to remember to share some of that artwork as a preview on the old Patreon there. So, if you're interested in work in progress stuff, you can toddle on over there. I have been tinkering with a 100 Apocalypses to join my 100 Adventure Seeds series. The problem I'm running into with that is that a lot of the solutions to various apocalypses that the world might face are basically the same. Create a shelter and wait it out. So there's a lot of repetition, possibly more repetition than an AI in what I'm writing. So I might have to turn to AI to switch the language up or give me some more out there ideas, but that's what AI is not very good at. So yeah, it's tricky. Similar problems I ran into when I wrote the 100 Conspiracies and 100 Conspirators in the 100 series, in that there was a lot of repetition. So it's more work than I thought it was going to be. Probably need to rewrite, but I'm about halfway through that. But I'm finding motivation difficult for a lot of things. You know, you look at the success of these big Kickstarters of what are essentially fantasy heartbreakers, and it's very hard to stay motivated in that sort of situation where you see relatively uncreative projects garnering enormous support. And you know, here's you doing your own little thing, trying to do different things, independent things, things that even buck the indie scene itself, and not necessarily doing so well, you know. But I can't bring myself to work on things that don't interest me in some way, unless I'm being compensated from outside. But that runs into a whole set of other issues. Working for other people is difficult because they have expectations and deadlines and things. The pressure's good for the motivation, but tiring and wearing. And my health still isn't fantastic. The summer depression has eased a little as things have been colder and wetter here in the UK. But I'm still having some physical issues on and off as well. People can be kind of flip about it, but at the same time, you know, you don't want to dwell on it or play it for sympathy or whatever. So when I inform people that I am depressed or physically unwell, it's not really to garner sympathy, it's just to explain to people why I might be a bit off, or why I don't appear on camera as much as I would normally on the podcast and things. It's because a dip in physical and mental health makes me feel self-conscious about my appearance and being on camera and all the rest of it. But again, it's just to keep people informed as to why I might be a little off, slow to communicate, slow to get things done, all the rest of that. Speaking of things like that, we talked on Dungeons and Discussions about etiquette in gaming, mostly at the table. But I think something that is missing, that I'm seeing a lot, is any sense of gratitude. You know, if someone takes the time to put a game together, to organize a session, to run it for you, and it's probably just confirmation bias, but everywhere I look I seem to see people being not entitled exactly, but it's kind of like online dating. You know, people want exactly what they want, and seem to be unwilling to work at it from the other side. So if you can't get exactly what you want, then you just reject what is there. You know, the perfect is the enemy of the good and all that. And in the same way that apps have created a certain degree of unrealistic expectations in some quarters of the dating world, so it seems that being able to play from anyone around the world makes people a lot more selective, unrealistically selective, perhaps, when it comes to what games they're going to play, or whether they stick around, or whether they show up, or whatever else. And this goes along with this trend that we've seen of devaluing the role of the games master, of relegating them or treating them as an authoritarian figure rather than another player who has invested more time and effort into the game than anyone else, and thereby deserves a bit of respect and a bit of gratitude and a bit of deference isn't the right word, but it'll convey the meaning I'm trying to, you know, the respect and quote deference unquote that a referee has in a sporting match or whatever. I don't like the term referee for Games Master. It doesn't really encompass the whole thing, but yeah, this seems to be missing. I see a lot of people griping or getting upset when they should be happy that they get to play in a game, even if it's imperfect or they don't get to spend the whole time in the spotlight or whatever. Certainly is my perception. There seems to be a lot of that going around, and give your head a wobble. On to the comments. On the BroSR video, Commander Relton Poole says, let people do what they want to do. Right, so this is the problem with a lot of gaming culture at the moment. Everyone seems to want to tell everyone else what they can and can't do, whereas my position tends to be just do what you want, just leave other people alone, which seems to be much the same as Commander Poole's here. The trouble with game style evangelists or game system evangelists, or people who evangelize X cards or consent check sheets and all the rest of it, is that they don't want to just let people do what they want to do. They feel that they know the right way to do things, and therefore they seek to impose that way upon others, either by bullying or changing the rules or changing the out of character rules at locations or conventions or game stores or whatever. And then that is where you run into the problem. There's a sort of abdication of personal responsibility on one end and just browbeating and bullying on the other. And in that sense, the BroSR is just the other side of the coin from the people who insist on X cards and so on. Their strenuous evangelism that theirs is the only way to play is just as annoying, just in a different way. So yeah, I agree. Let people do what they want to do. You know, we can have the arguments, and discussions, but the browbeating and the force really needs to stop. Whoever is doing it, to whoever. Bearnaff says, Harmony Ginger speaks highly of her experiences with running 1-1. I assume that it's like any other RPG gimmick, perfection incarnate when a GM who understands it implements it well for a party that's ready to embrace it, but otherwise just another way to play. That said, if it's good enough for a real-life gelfling, it's probably good enough overall. Gelfling? Where is Gelfling? Yeah. Not much of a reply, but yeah, I think it is pretty much like anything else. It'll work well in some instances, and it won't work well in others. It's the one true wayism that's the problem. Wraithing says, no idea what the Bro-SR was. Now I've watched half an interview with an unpictured dude called Jeffro Johnson. Maybe I'm too British to understand most of what he says. He talks about Gygax and Arneson like messianic figures, and said playing D&D wrong can physically damage you, like exercising in the wrong way in a gym. What the fuck is he doing? Whatever it is, it sounds fucking exhausting and not a lot of fun. I gave up when he got into American Christianity, barn raisings and speed dating. And dance. To a certain extent, I think Jeffro is playing a heel online, same way that Pundit does a lot of the time. Ironically, saying that playing wrong can damage you has its corollary on the other side of the a gaming coin again, where Professor Batdong, he of GNS theory and so on, of story games. I don't think he created GNS theory, but he popularized it to a large extent. He said that, playing D&D could damage your brain. So here's to all us physically and mentally damaged people and the way we play games. On the Safety Tools satire video, Kev O'Reilly said, I actually don't mind Session Zero and Safety Tools. It's a great opportunity for players to realise my campaign is not for them. I don't change my table changes to the campaign. And yeah, that is the one legitimate use for Safety Tools, is that if people demand them, they can fuck off. And the rest of you can continue to have fun without them. So yeah, they do have an unintended use there as a sort of great filter of arseholes so that they don't play. But the problem again arises in that these people have inserted these rules and restrictions into gaming, into organised gaming, into tournament play and conventions and stores and games clubs and so on. Even private games, if you open them up to new players, sometimes they will rock up and have their demands and expectations, right? And it's always awkward turning someone away from the table or having to comply in these convention and store scenarios and so on. So yeah, in most normal circumstances, great, you can use them as a filter to turn people away. But in other instances, in the things that create and transmit the culture of the hobby, the core textbooks, the conventions, those sorts of things, there it's imposed and there it's a problem, which is making things worse. On the Crossbows and Catapults video, Mr. Brother Sky says, welcome to my midlife crisis. Gods, that's for real. Led me to buy the new production of Hero Quest. Yeah. There are worse things to have a midlife crisis about. Could have blown thousands on a Harley Davidson and well, you know how that goes. Or a 20-something mistress in a sports car or whatever. A few board games seems like a relatively sane and sanitized midlife crisis compared to that, right? Maybe not. Hunraku says, I always wanted this game too. Less painful than us running around in the desert throwing rocks at each other. We did lots of that. We threw cowpats at each other. They get crispy on the outside, still wet in the middle. You stick a stick in them and use the stick to fling the cowpat at the other person. yeah, we also shot arrows at each other, actual arrows, from homemade bows made from sticks and baling twine and whatever other scrap we could find, and we would fight pitched battles over the best places to have dens built in the woods. Yeah, or making tunnels in hay bales at threat of having them fall on you, and crawling down the tunnels and being suddenly faced by rats. You know, God, we had such a great childhood, didn't we, Gen X? On the shopping trips video, Wraithing says, "Given Mr. Ben, take off your hat, suddenly all your clothes are different, you've entered the changing room of a friendly mustachioed man in a fez, and your corporate suburbanite world has utterly dissolved away into an alternate, weekly shifting universe where you exit through his magic back door. I've been waiting for that to happen for years. Got to keep voting for more immigration until the right fez-wearing clothier can come to town. I'll even buy a bowler hat." I have an intro that's an homage to Mr. Ben. I don't know if you've seen it, but yes, that's one way to make shopping more interesting. A magic shop that isn't a shop that sells magic, but rather a shop that is magic, and where weird things happen to the patrons of the store. I'm sure there are other literary and other examples. There's one in The Ogre Downstairs where a stepfather buys what he thinks is a chemistry kit from a mysterious shop and gives it to his kids, and it turns out to be an alchemy kit where they can rub the Philosopher's Stone on things made of metal and turn it into gold, or they can make things come alive by splashing a particular alchemical chemical on them. So, you know, there are other sources for cool and weird stores selling odd things, and those odd things can be sources of adventure in and of themselves. On the Glorious 5-Year Plan video, Cuttlefist, great name by the way, says, "I think companies and customers need to reevaluate what success means in this industry. With the internet, players have access to so much material. I do think there'll be another big company. The pie isn't something that can be split 75-10, 1-1-1 anymore, with one company getting the lion's share. There are so many games that people can learn about and crowdfund and download. They aren't beholden to what the box stores are supplying. Even home 3D printers are scaring Games Workshop. How can they sell their overpriced figures if another 2 or 3 games come along that cheaply produce more figures or allow people to print their figures themselves? These companies need to accept they will only get so much of the pie because there are even more at the table than before, and they all have similar sized knives." Yeah, so I've shared my view on this before on the Weekend Geek and other places. I hark back to when, so you had MMOs like EverQuest and Ultima Online and others for a while, and then along came World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft was hugely fucking popular. And after World of Warcraft, nobody was trying to look for a particular niche or do something different. They were all trying to emulate World of Warcraft or become the World of Warcraft killer, right? And none of them could achieve it, and a lot of them failed. Whereas if they had focused on their niche and providing something different and special, and hadn't had their eye on that big prize, then I think a lot more of them would have been successful. More modestly successful, sure, but artistically successful, commercially successful, you know, to a lesser degree, but certainly enough for people to be employed and so on. But because everyone was chasing WoW, nobody really made their own game anymore. They all had their eye on that, and I think a similar problem is happening with the presumed gold rush to take over from D&D after 6th edition, but people aren't doing things that are different or interesting enough. Yeah, in the past, what has beaten D&D has been D&D itself making a huge misstep which I feel like 6th edition kind of is, but not as bad as 4th edition. And either doing continuity of what D&D was doing before, as Pathfinder did, or doing something very, very different that somehow tapped into the zeitgeist, which is how Vampire and Mage, to a lesser extent, both outsold D&D for a short period. But this time around, I just see people trying to do the old D&D but better, and that's a recipe for failure. Stop chasing the dragon and make your own shit, I think, conceptually as well as mechanically. Edward Kopp says, the goal is to be influencing the industry in the niche markets. The cutesy saying, the riches are in the niches, is going to be true in role-playing businesses. As the mean age of gamers, in particular TTRPGs, keeps getting older, the desire for a luxury product / experience will grow. My observations at the end of June during Origins are that a variation on the subscription model is where I see the most lucrative niche to expend my efforts. As a chef and sommelier, I see the need for a club / subscription luxury gaming experience model as a successful model for third-party publishers. Some people are kind of trying that through Patreons and things. You're probably right in that is a way to go. Certainly the niche exploitation is. I also think the Palladium model of producing lots of material cheaply and engaging in a rich way with your audience might well do well, though it would require a level of modernization that Palladium itself is unwilling and unable seemingly to do. But yeah, it could work. Troffle says, predict. Pfeh, can you influence? For the love of every dear or dark god ever in the whole of several multiverses, please can you? I have very little influence anymore. I have experience, but I don't have influence. I've burned too many bridges and been too pure in my expectations of other people, morally and ethically, and those I haven't personally fallen out with are overly influenced, ironically enough, by the weird stories and stuff that go around about me. So I have precious little influence and not enough money to make a big splash, unfortunately. On the Anything But Tory video, which thankfully that's how things turned out, Polar Bleed says, Jim already got a taste of the red pill when he noticed what left-wing activists, who for some reason he denies are left-wing, did to hobbies, mainly targeted at males and a few non-misandrist women, maybe. Maybe he'll finally swallow that red pill once a bunch of mostly peaceful Muslim immigrants arrives at his doorstep and have a problem with his "in this house we support sluts" sign. Spare me the hateful bigotry and don't upbraid me for not falling for that kind of bigotry in the same way that you have. I deny these people are left-wing because what they do does not fit in with left-wing ideology or philosophy. When something doesn't meet the definition, it's not, it's not that thing. It's not that definition. It is something else. There is this habit, particularly amongst Americans, of misdefining political terms, which is hugely aggravating and leads to the more sort of general level of political illiteracy in America. I think people don't understand the concepts, they just understand labels, meaning good or bad, and they throw those labels around willy-nilly to the point that they have no meaning anymore. As to the Muslim comments, yeah, Islam is concerning. However, most Muslims are bad Muslims. So, if someone's scarfing down bacon sandwiches and going out on the lash on a Friday night, then they don't worry me. And most people kind of normalise to the larger culture, he says, slowly turning into RFK. Most people normalise to the larger culture within about 3 generations at the most, which means, however radical Muslim immigrants might be, their kids are usually more secular, and their kids are generally just part of the overall culture, much more liberalised. And that's the hope for the future, that Islam will have some sort of reformation in the same way that Christianity did. Just might take a few more 100 years is all. On the Genilex, the general election, F equals MA says, well, the only reason Farage and his cronies get any time and don't just sit in their hate bunkers yelling at the telly is because of client media that platforms them. The client media is client media in the service of the Tories in this country for the most part. The left-wing media is a lot smaller, with much lower circulation and so on, because of the relative lack of backing, and that's the problem with critiquing capitalism, I suppose. It's harder to get money. But I don't think that's the reason why Farage, etc. get so much media attention. They get so much media attention because they're telegenic, because they say something stupid or outrageous, something that feeds the media cycle, something that gets people to click, to watch, to pay attention. It's the same problem with Trump. He might be a huge, incompetent, adjudicated rapist, sack of shit, felon, right? But he's entertaining and controversial. People click on stuff to do with Trump, whether they love him or hate him, and that drives the media cycle and makes the media money, because money ruins everything. Basically, it's the same with Farage and Reform, and also the fact they seem to have spent an enormous amount of money on bots. Now, you may notice the Kalergi plan doesn't have any comments in this video. Alas, that is not because white supremacists have suddenly packed up and gone home. It's just that the comments on the Kalergi plan videos were so utterly retarded and so limited to insults and spamming conspiracy theories that there was just nothing to reply to. But rest assured, the madmen are still out there. Zang. I have a woefully undersubscribed subreddit, so please do me a favour. If you're a Redditor, head on over to r/postmortem studios and talk about anything related to any of my shenanigans. Peace.